Hello, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, November 17th. This is Africa 54.
The U.S. Secretary of State kicks off his three-nation tour of Africa with a stop in the Kenyan capital. The African Union sets up a Nairobi Situation Room to help the continent mitigate disasters. And in Senegal, how quiet beaches are helping endangered turtles thrive.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is reiterating calls for an unconditional ceasefire in the Ethiopian conflict on Wednesday on the first leg of an African trip in which he is visiting Kenya, Nigeria and Senegal. The one-year war in northern Ethiopia's Tigray region, the coup in Sudan and Somalia's long-delayed elections are expected to dominate the agenda during Blinken's meetings in Africa. Blinken addressed the media in Nairobi, saying there is still time for a ceasefire to succeed in Ethiopia. He says the U.S. is deeply concerned that the conflict could spill over to the Horn of Africa.
The way the conflict has progressed, more and more parts of the country have become involved and or are in jeopardy with their citizens bearing the consequences. And whether that's in Tigray over the last year, more recently in Amara, and moving further south toward Addis. The people who suffer are the people, and we have to make sure that they are getting the assistance they need and that the fighting ceases and the talking starts. In addition to that, the conflict in Ethiopia is a threat to peace and security in the Horn of Africa, and that is of deep concern to us too, and it's of deep concern to our partners, including here in Kenya. So we're looking for all sides, as I said, to step back. The TPLF and the OLA should halt their advance on Addis. We'd like to see the parties come together at the table to put in place a cessation of hostilities. We need to see humanitarian assistance flow freely now. We need to see people detained released. And we need to see everyone engaging in an effort to resolve the differences that exist peacefully and constitutionally.
Blinken also acknowledged that the world's democracies are facing the twin challenges of misinformation and corruption.
Even vibrant democracies like Kenya experiencing these pressures, especially around election time. We've seen the same challenge here that we see in many parts of the world. Misinformation, political violence, voter intimidation, voter bribery, fanning tensions between ethnic groups. And these are stories that we see in place after place. And there is also something that chips away at democracy in country after country, and that's corruption. There's also bias and discrimination.
Blinken told a civil society group that the United States is not immune from this challenge and has seen how fragile the American democracy can be. The top U.S. diplomat told the participants he wanted to hear their perspectives on democratic challenges and their ideas on solving them. At this hour, Secretary Blinken is meeting with Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and other government leaders. Security officials in Uganda say the nation remains under a threat of more bombing attacks just one day after the Islamic State terrorist group claimed responsibility for 2 explosions in the capital, Kampala, that killed 2 civilians and a police officer and wounded 33 others, some critically. Police say 3 suicide bombers also died in Tuesday's blast, which they initially blamed on a radical group called the Allied Democratic Forces. The explosions near a police station and parliament were carried out by the attackers carrying explosives. A possible attack on a third target was foiled by police who pursued and disarmed a suspected suicide bomber. Ugandan officials are urging vigilance in the wake of a string of bombings in recent weeks. In West Africa, officials say unidentified gunmen have killed at least 25 people in southwest Niger. This is the latest in a string of deadly raids along the country's border with Mali. The mayor of the town of Tila says attackers on motorcycles stormed the camp of a local self-defense militia near the village of Bakurat in the Tahua region on Tuesday. A gunfight lasted for several hours before Nigerian security forces repelled the attackers. The attack is part of a wider wave of violence that has swept across West Africa's Sahel region since 2017. In an interview with VOA's Aliou Mustafa in Niamey, Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum spoke about why terrorism continues to be a challenge to his country.
This terrorism does not behave like it did 2 or 3 years ago, because back then, terrorists rarely attacked populations. But for the past 2 years, and this year in particular, the terrorists' mode of action consists above all in attacking civilian populations, in mistreating them and killing them. Unfortunately, sometimes on a large scale, but above all, in extorting them, collecting taxes and damaging their daily lives. And it's always annoying for a regime to be powerless in the face of these actions, because quite simply, you see, we have a very large space, and the terrorists coming mostly from foreign countries prey on villages which are totally peripheral. They extort, loot livestock, racketeering, and so on. That's why it is a bit difficult today. Niger is surrounded by 2 countries that are experiencing situations that have favored this phenomenon. The 800 kilometers of our border with Mali, you can travel it. You will not meet a single Malian authority, not a single security or defense force of this brother country. Obviously, there is a space there that favors the actions of terrorists. We have an identical situation with the Libyan border, where there are no representatives of the state, no security or defense forces of this country. These are not factors that favor stability, quite the opposite. This is why the security challenge is a particularly difficult challenge for a country like ours, which has to deal with this phenomenon on several of its borders.
VOA's Aliou Mustafa in Niamey speaking with Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum. As the earth gets warmer and weather events more extreme, the African Union has set up a disaster operations center in Nairobi to help monitor major hazards. Juma Majanga reports from Nairobi.
Flooding scenes in Africa show how vulnerable the continent is to climate change, even though it is the lowest producer of greenhouse gas emissions in the world. To cope with such disasters, the African Union is setting up a centralized monitoring and early warning system for the continent. The Nairobi Disaster Operations Center for the East African region is the continent's first situation room.
The Council of the Ministers with the Member States sat and said we need to have a disaster operations center based in Nairobi, which will focus mainly on early warning systems. So that gave birth to establishment in this office so that we look at a broader aspect of different disasters within the region.
The center, located at the IGAD Climate Prediction and Applications Center, uses the East Africa Hazards Watch. It's a system developed by the center for collecting and sharing multi-hazard data with the respective member countries.
The system works automatically so that it ingests in the data set. Algorithm is set within the cluster. We have a supercomputing system within ICPAC. So there's less human attachment to it. It's also near real time, so it's every 10 days. The update itself, and we see the conditions of drought. In this region of Ethiopia, actually we have so many people who are affected and moving out of this area.
The center, which opened in October, is to provide climate information and early warnings to 11 East African countries. Officials say local communities must be ready to respond quickly to save lives and minimize damage.
So we must equip the communities themselves to be able to respond to a disaster in its first hours at least. And so I think we owe it to them to set up this early warning system and ensure that it's functional and that people who are vulnerable to disasters are able to access that information in a timely way to save lives and property.
As Africa experiences more extreme weather, officials say early warnings and early action will help limit its impact. Juma Majanga for VOA News, Nairobi.
Kibera, a suburb of Nairobi, Kenya, is one of the largest informal settlements in Africa with a population of more than 252,000 people. COVID-19 has ravaged the community that was already reeling from economic hardships prior to the pandemic. But thanks to women medical professionals from CFK Africa who joined the fight to battle the coronavirus and other communicable diseases, Kibera residents are now receiving COVID-19 vaccines and information on how to stay safe. For more perspective on the services these women are offering, I'm joined live via Skype from Nairobi by Esther Ogogo, CFK's Africa Primary Healthcare Program Coordinator. Esther, welcome to Africa 54. What kind of vaccines?
Thank you for having me, Esther.
What kind of vaccines are you offering at the Tabitha Medical Clinic, and to how many people a day on average?
Thank you for having me on the show. At CFK Africa, we have a facility that offers COVID-19 vaccines. Among them are Moderna, Pfizer, and AstraZeneca vaccines. We have the capacity to reach up to 30 people per day with the vaccine. And so far, we have reached 500 people within Kibera and supported the government to offer jabs to over 5,000 people within Nairobi and Kiambu counties.
Now, Esther, we've seen a lot of hesitancy about this COVID-19 vaccine. What are some of the concerns being raised about this vaccine by the Kibera community?
Like in many communities, they are worried. Pregnant women are worried about their unborn children, and they wonder if they take the vaccine, will they be safe together with the child? We have matters concerning infertility, and a lot of questions are raised by women, especially of childbearing age and men of the same age groups. We also have issues of comorbidity. Those who suffer various comorbidities, they ask questions around, will they be safe if they have diabetes, for example, or hypertension, and would it affect them if they took the vaccine? So those three main areas form the biggest questions that we answer on a day-to-day basis.
Now, one of your main focus has been maternal and child health. Why is this so important?
The first 5 years in the life of a child are quite important, and they form the health outcome as they grow. And also, as we've entered into Kibera, we realized there was a high rate of home deliveries, which raised the morbidity and mortality in the women and children. And our focus really greatly was in women and children, just because the informal settlements do not offer them proper access to quality and affordable healthcare. And these globally are the main vulnerable groups that we look into when it comes to healthcare. So that is why we focus more on them.
And very quickly, what's your next goal for the Kibera community?
For Kibera, we plan to continue with the services we've offered over the last 20 years and to go on with health system strengthening to allow the community members to own and participate actively in the services that we have enhanced and provided for them over the years.
A noble calling. Esther, thank you so much. Esther Ogogo is a progressive community health advocate and is CFK's Africa Primary Healthcare Program Coordinator. She joined us live via Skype from Nairobi. Still to come, residents in western Senegal are witnessing a rise in the number of nests of an endangered species. But first, here's Hedy Adams to tell us what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
Be sure to join me on the next Straight Talk Africa. We'll bring you the complex political situation and growing humanitarian disaster in Ethiopia, where civil war has displaced many in that country's Tigray region. VOA's Heather Murdoch takes us inside the largely cut-off conflict zone, as well as refugee camps in neighboring Sudan. So join us for VOA's documentary Terror in Tigray on the next Straight Talk Africa.
As a result of peace brought on from global health crisis shutdowns, the shores of western Senegal are witnessing a rise in the number of endangered turtle nests. Rachel Judah has more.
On a moonlit shore in western Senegal, baby turtles sprint towards the Atlantic Ocean. The West African country's sandy beaches are historic nesting sites for several threatened sea turtle species. But in recent decades, increased fishing, tourism and construction have deterred the country's 3 species of turtle, which all appear on the extinction red list, from nesting along its urban coasts. However, the global health crisis and its accompanying restrictions, which led to darker beaches with less light pollution, has had a positive impact on the turtles. This is Saliou Mbodji from the Somone Marine Protection Area.
Du coup, les frontières étaient fermées. The
borders were closed, so there weren't many people on the beaches or in the hotels. There were fewer lights on, and so more turtles came to lay their eggs on the beaches. This is why since last year we've seen such a return of sea turtles here. Although there were small nests identified here and there, last year we saw a great influx.
In Guério, just south of the capital Dakar, 15 turtles nested on the beach last season, up from just 2 the previous year, according to Environment Ministry records. But as more people return, the turtles keep their distance. Researcher and marine conservationist Charlotte Thomas has a stark warning if nesting rates return to pre-pandemic levels.
Turtles, for those who do not know, play the role of ocean cleaner, and they are often called ocean garbage collectors elsewhere. They regulate marine algae by eating them, and marine algae is depended upon by lots of other species, such as tuna, lobster, and shrimp. If these turtles were to disappear, that would create an imbalance in the food chain and threaten the entire ecosystem.
In the meantime, baby turtles continue to make their way towards the ocean, with the help of volunteers.
Rachel Judah of Reuters filed that report. Nearly 200 countries signed the Glasgow Climate Pact at the end of COP26 summit. They are pledging to speed up action on tackling climate change. Henry Ridgel reports.
Hearing no objections, it is so decided.
The gavel came down on 2 weeks of intense and sometimes emotional negotiations. 197 nations finally agreed on a deal aimed at preventing catastrophic climate change. The summit president described it as a fragile win.
History has been made here in Glasgow. And what we now need to ensure that the next chapter charts the success of the commitments that we have solemnly made together in the Glasgow Climate Pact. Thank you.
The goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, first laid out in 2015, remains a key pillar of the Glasgow Agreement. And for the first time, the Climate Pact included a reference to ending fossil fuels. But to the dismay of many delegates, last-minute pressure from India and China forced a watering down of the language.
How can anyone expect that developing countries can make promises about phasing out coal and fossil fuel subsidies? Developing countries have still to deal with their development agendas and poverty eradication.
So what was signed off in the final text? All countries agreed to come back next year with improved targets on cutting emissions, much sooner than the previous 5-year cycle. They agreed to phase down, rather than phase out, coal and fossil fuels. Rich countries agreed to increase their commitments on climate finance, the money they will pay to poorer countries to adapt to climate change and decarbonise their economies. And there's new recognition of the need for richer nations to compensate developing countries for loss and damage from climate change. There was an agreement on international carbon markets, whereby CO2 emission quotas or credits can be traded between countries. And there were separate deals on reducing deforestation and slashing methane emissions. The deal was a compromise, a text that all 197 parties signed, some reluctantly. Is it enough? Opinions differ widely.
We are, in fact, closer than we have ever been before to avoiding climate chaos and securing cleaner air, a safer water, and healthier planet.
The approved texts are a compromise. They reflect the interests, the conditions, the contradictions, and the state of political will in the world today. They take important steps, but unfortunately, the collective political will was not enough to overcome some deep contradictions.
Well, I think it's meek and it's weak, but it does send a signal of the end of coal. So that is a good thing, but it doesn't meet the moment.
Outside the summit, climate activists made their feelings clear. Some were arrested as they tried to scale the summit barriers. After 2 weeks of intense negotiations, delegates are now heading home. The next big milestone is the COP27 climate summit, scheduled to be held in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, in 2022. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News at the COP26 summit, Glasgow.
From startups to established business leaders in every industry, South Africa is one of Africa's best countries to do business. Entrepreneurs are helping to drive innovation and job creation. This year, Vessels of Virtue, a Johannesburg-based social enterprise, recognizes individuals in entrepreneurship, innovation, and technological advances from across Africa. Africa 54 technology correspondent Paul Ndiho spoke to Precious Nyarambi, the founder and CEO, Vessels of Virtue.
Precious Nyarambi, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Paul.
You run an organization that is going to be giving some global awards to entrepreneurs across the continent. Who are these people, and how did you select some of these outstanding nominees?
We run an organization that is passionate about empowering individuals, communities, nations, hopefully, and the world at large. These awards specifically are aimed at acknowledging, appreciating, and honoring individuals that have demonstrated leadership traits in their organizations, that have demonstrated excellence in their entrepreneurial endeavors, as well as in their social entrepreneurship projects. We set out a nominations process that we ran almost 4 months ago, where individuals felt like they could nominate themselves or they can be nominated based on the work that they are doing. So true and behold, others nominated themselves, others were nominated, and we then went through a process of adjudication where we had different industry experts in the space of leadership and social entrepreneurship that were helping us with the adjudication process of trying to match who wins, who doesn't win, who qualifies, and then also what further support can these individuals get.
What does it take for those individuals that have been nominated or who nominated themselves to make it to be the finalists?
From my heart, I feel that sometimes people that are doing impactful work, they are not easily recognized. It's individuals that we feel that they've done outstanding work. It can be verified, it can be proved that they've been working tirelessly, and they've also survived the COVID. COVID-19 pandemic. They're doing amazing work, and is evidence for that. If you're a social entrepreneur, we want to verify the work and the impact and the change that you are bringing to communities, to change the narrative of people, of yourself, creating employment for yourself and other people. So we were looking all into that. And the leadership component came in from an angle where you can't be an entrepreneur and not be a leader, because daily you have to make decisions to lead yourself and the others that you work with, different stakeholders that you engage.
How many categories are there?
We have 3 main categories, but then we have others that fall under that. So we are looking into innovation, we are looking into farming, we are looking into technology, we are looking into the banking sector, financials, we are looking at the social impact change under social entrepreneurship, we are looking at emerging leaders, people that are demonstrating that, Africa is in need of a good leadership generation. So we're also looking into that.
What are you excited about tomorrow?
I want to see a room full of change makers that will stop at nothing. Change makers that unconditionally embraces diversity and the essence of humanity. I want to see a room full of individuals, leaders, entrepreneurs, and social entrepreneurs that defy the odds, that have a heart for Africa, that wants to be a part of changing the African narrative and making Africa a better place, because this is our home. I want to see a room full of individuals that want to be a part of changing the narrative for Africa, that we can actually lead, and we are going to lead one way or the other. I want to see us embracing a culture of appreciating each other and taking cognizance of the tireless efforts that people make on a day-to-day basis, and just being the positive vibe that the next person wants. It's easier for us to pull each other down, but hey, it won't harm if you can bring that positive feel to the next person and encourage the next person to continue running their race. And if you are able then to help that person to go to the next stage, then do so. That's what I want to see.
Well, thank you so much, Precious, for your time.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate the opportunity.
That was Africa 54 tech correspondent Paul Ndiho speaking to Precious Nyarambi. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.